Before
Live.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us. Welcome to NAEA's first Google Hangout of the season. We're excited to jump in today and talk about museum-school partnerships. We chose this topic as a way to kick off the academic year for a couple of reasons, one of which being that those of us who are involved in museum school partnerships, this is the time of year when we're getting so many things up and running and started. So it seemed like a natural topic to dive in on, especially given the number of changes that we've seen in the field regarding what the nature of museum school partnerships are and what success looks like in those partnerships. So we're joined today by a series of experts in the field, those of us who are in the trenches doing the work, and those of us who are coordinating those who are in the trenches doing the work. We have a classroom teacher, we have museum educators, we've got a whole gaggle of folks, so we've got a great conversation ahead of us. My name is David Bowles. I will be facilitating the conversation for today. I am the Assistant Museum Educator for School Programs at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I'm joined today by a talented panel, and I will introduce them one by one. One of our colleagues is still trying to log in, so hopefully by the time we get to the end of our introductions, she will have found a way to make her tech work. But why don't I start, I'll go left to right by my monitor. So that'll start with Amanda Lesnikowski, who
Hi.
is the School and Teacher Programs Coordinator at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Amanda, do you want to say hi and tell us a little bit about you?
Hi. I've been at MIA since December, so I'm coming up on 1 year, and I'm the School and Teacher Programs Coordinator. So I work with a variety of programs that are both strictly school-based and school and museum partnerships. We had kids here already this morning for one of our programs, and I'm excited to be here.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Debi West, who works at North Gwinnett High School and is NAEA's Southeastern Vice President and GAEA's past president. Debi, do you want to say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everybody. Debi West. I've been teaching students through the Vehicle of Art for 23 years now. I taught 14 years at the elementary level, and this is my 9th year at the high school level. So it's kind of fun. All the ones that I had when they were little, I now have when they are big. So it's really good to be here. So thank you for the invite. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Super. And next we've got Megan Kuensting, who works here with me at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Megan is our Education Programs Coordinator and lives, eats, and breathes all things school partnership. Megan, thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, thanks. Yeah, I am the, as David said, the coordinator for school partnerships this year, and it's a program that we're getting back up off the ground since we sort of stopped doing school partnerships back in 2008. So we're really excited to gain some information from people working on school partnerships throughout the country and hearing what's going on in the field.
Great, thank you. And we're still waiting. Hopefully Jennifer Lehe, the Manager of Strategic Partnerships at the Columbus Museum of Art, will be able to log in and join us soon. So for those of you who are following us, if another panelist pops in, I'll be sure to stop the conversation and introduce her when she joins us. I'd like to remind everybody who's watching that we have a Q&A feature. If you have questions for the panel as we get started, please feel free to type them in. I'll be keeping an eye on those questions, and if you see a question that really is interesting to you that somebody else has asked, give it a thumbs up, and that'll let us know which questions are rising to the surface as the most important to deal with. So without any further ado, I think it's time to jump in to our conversation, and I'll start us off with a sort of big picture think. When you think about school partnerships, or rather, when you think about partnerships between museums and schools, what do you think success looks like when it comes to these partnerships?
I can start. I don't. Do we have a specific order? I'm not quite sure if we ever.
No, we don't. Whoever feels moved to speak.
You know, we do formal evaluations of our programs, if not every year, every few years, and it's nice to have formal numbers and a formal document that allows us to say this is success. But I also think it's part of just seeing the kids grow throughout a program, especially when you have a multi-visit program. Some things can't be documented in numbers, or on paper, and you see their confidence build and you see them become empowered young individuals. And I think that even if their writing sample or their family portrait isn't the strongest artistically or technically, it's watching them have the confidence to show it to you and be proud of it. And I think the success comes from the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go next. I'll talk from my view of coming in as an educator and bringing my students to a museum. For me, it's in their faces. It's in that excitement and that joy of standing in front of a master artist that they've only before seen on a screen or in a book that we've talked about. And it's almost like the presence of that artist comes to life in front of our kiddos. And that joy, I've seen children weep. And to me, that is, I guess, the most important thing about that partnership is that we're affording our kids that opportunity to be able to go in and experience it. And then often what happens in my community is the kids then go home with this unbelievable, authentic excitement, and they become the curators that take their parents to the museums. So that's the the big partnership, is that it kind of grows and becomes something that is very contagious.
So really thinking about the affective side of learning and the emotional role that students bring to the conversation. Megan, before I let you speak, I just want to address Tina's question in the Q&A. Audience members are not muted, but you can certainly type your Q&A in that field, and that's how we on the panel will be hearing from you. Megan, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the Met is just sort of getting a couple of new partnerships off the ground while also maintaining some older special relationships that we've had with schools from the past. So success for us at this point is just making sure that nobody leaves us, just keeping everybody with us. But more seriously, I think partnership success for us is really about connecting with teachers as they've identified specific goals for themselves, curriculum goals, learning goals, and just making sure that we're able to respond using all the resources that we have available to them. So yeah, we're still kind of working out the kinks about what formal assessment and formal evaluation will look like as we sort of dive into these new partnerships, but it's exciting.
Yeah. Thank you. And Jen, is that you? Are you with us? Almost.
I think so, but I don't think that we had to find a workaround, and I don't think that we did, because I think the internet is not going to be fast enough with this option. I think
That's fair. Well, hopefully she'll be able to join us soon. Oh, it looks like I've lost. Oh, no, there's a couple folks back. Megan, while you're on the topic of questions, I see a question from Rachel Marino, who's asking a little bit about why the museum stopped doing school partnerships in 2008, and to engage a little bit more in this idea of sustaining and when do you start, when do you sustain, and when do you end a partnership with a school?
Yeah, apologies. I was trying to type a response to that, but for some reason it wasn't letting me click on there. Yeah, so the Met stopped doing school partnerships in 2008 for a multitude of reasons. I think the biggest probably being the economy, just needing to cut back in certain areas. But yeah, this is actually a great question. One that I think we're still working on is what does it mean to end a partnership? When should it end? Is there really an end? Because ideally, I mean, one of our goals is to really foster within the schools that we're working with this idea that the museum is a place for them always, and that they would keep returning and keep coming back to use us and use us as a resource forever, and have that be sort of an institutional thing for them. So I guess talking about the formal end of a partnership versus that relationship completely collapsing are two different things. But I think for us right now, we're focusing at least on just sort of year-long partnerships. So throughout a school year, just seems to kind of make sense, as keeping with the same administration that you started with, hopefully, and all that. So.
Great. Well, this seems like a good chance for the panel to tell us a little bit more about what the nature of the school partnerships that they're involved in. So maybe I can ask the panel to go into a little more depth to describe exactly the nature of the partnership that you've participated in or are participating in between a museum and a school.
I can start.
Thank you.
So, for instance, Minneapolis Institute of Art, we have a program called Creativity Academy, which is a multi-visit program. So we have identified 4 schools, 12 classrooms, and we go to the schools for one lesson, they come to us, we go to them for a 3rd lesson, they come to the museum for the 4th and final lesson, and at the end we do an exhibition of their artwork. And these schools have been identified, they're Title I schools that don't have a structured art program or structured art educator on a regular basis. And each lesson begins by looking at a work of art from our permanent collection. The class does a writing assignment as a whole. Children are dismissed to go do their own writing assignment and then do their own art activity that relates to what they've been focusing on. And this is the 3rd year of the program. So for us, I'm looking at the questions that come in. We view partnerships as being something where there's cross-communication. So, schools that visit on a regular basis, we love that. And I guess they are partners in what it is we're doing, but we do see, I guess, a formal line around things like Creativity Academy where we've identified schools, contracts have been signed, and there's a very religious, consistent structure to it.
David, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear David.
That's because I'm muted. I apologize. I'm just going to ask the rest of the panel as they tell us a little bit more about the partnerships they've participated in to also engage with Gina Hall's question, which has 13 pluses already. How do you distinguish between a school partnership and a school that comes to a museum several times? What exactly makes something a partnership? So I think that'll kind of align nicely with telling us a little bit about the partnerships you're doing.
Well, I've had partnerships in the past, and unfortunately I don't have what I guess would term the signed contract partnership anymore. I've been in Gwinnett County, which is a suburb about 25 miles outside of Atlanta, for 23 years now. And back in the day, we had really wonderful partnerships, not only set up with the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, but also with the Hudgens Center, which is a local Gwinnett County beautiful little museum. And because of busing schedules now and the high cost of busing our kids to museums, a lot of those kind of contracted partnerships have ended, but we certainly keep the communication alive. We figure out ways that we can take our kids down there on a Saturday. It's an experience that, I feel like the art teachers who have been in those partnerships will never ever end. As far as our county, every child has an arts education. Every school has one or multiple art teachers, so we're really, really blessed in that sense. But for us, it's that museum partnership is that additional tool that is, in my opinion, essential to teaching art education properly to our kiddos. So for me, it's always been a really amazing partnership. I'm going to keep calling it a partnership even without the signed contract, to continue to take the kids and encourage the kids and advertise to the kids how important it is to get to the high. And we also have a program, as I said, at the Hudgens Center for the Arts called the Art Smart program, and that's where we can nominate students to be a part of a year-long art-making process. So it sounded a little bit like what Amanda was talking about, that she has going on. So that's been really successful as well.
Interesting. So partnership can exist without contracts too.
Yes, indeed.
Interesting. Megan, do you want to jump in there?
Sure, yeah, and feel free to jump in if I leave anything out.
Yeah,
but I think
no problem.
as we're starting to conceptualize what MET version of a school partnership looks like, I mean, we certainly do have certain schools who are here consistently throughout a school year, who seem to be engaging with us in a lot of different ways, just because of, whatever it is, their proximal to the museum and it's easy for them for whatever reason. I think in terms of our partnerships, there's a marked difference in the depth in which we are working with both their teachers and their students. We are out in their classrooms, which is something that is more unique. That wouldn't necessarily happen for just a school tour, the sort of pre-visit, post-visit, multiple visits to the museum. Yeah, and I think in addition to that, while our school tours are usually based around a theme, and some of our museum educators are dabbling in using essential questions to guide their museum experiences for their visitors, ideally with our school partnerships, they will really be built around some kind of theme or essential question that ties into their curriculum for the year or for a unit. So I think that's where the difference really lies, is just the depth of engagement. So, yeah. Muted again.
And
David.
of course I was muted again. Jen, it looks like you've made it into our call. Oh, and maybe she's still muted. Hi, Jen, are you with us? Oh, unfortunately, we can't hear you, so I'm going to keep the conversation going. Hopefully, we'll get that snafu worked out soon. Another question for our panel is thinking a little bit about the reality of museum-school partnerships. We've talked a lot about sort of our ideals and what we want out of them. I'd love to hear from you a little bit about problems you've experienced. So feel free to change the names to protect the innocent, but we can all learn from each other's mistakes. What was one of the biggest partnership problems you've experienced when working between a museum and a school, and what did you learn from that experience?
I can start.
Sure, thanks, Amanda.
And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that with museum school partnerships, there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And so you're working with school administrators, you're working with classroom teachers, and then you have the volunteers on the museum side as well. And so it's keeping those lines of communication flowing, especially when you have multiple schools and multiple classrooms. You know, we met with teachers in August to plan out the year of programming and walked in, and the teacher was like, oh, we just need to grab one more teacher. And my colleague and I were like, one more teacher? She's like, yep, there's 3 fourth grades this year instead of 2. Is that a problem? And we were like, nope, just fine, the more the merrier. But it's being able to roll with those unexpected by the ways. And they're little and you move past them.
Yeah.
But you also have problems. You know, I saw a question come in. This one particular program had a sponsor for the first 2 years, and this year, you know, we weren't able to get a sponsor, but we were lucky enough to continue the program through, you know, our own funds. But that's the hardest part, especially when you're working to give free programming, as the money has to come from somewhere. But
that's interesting. Anyone else want to share? Debbie, I'd love to hear from the teacher side of things. What's one of the biggest problems you as a classroom teacher experienced during a museum partnership, and what did you learn from that?
Well, the biggest challenge and problem at the moment is that we can't get the money to get the buses to get there, because the museums are willing to give us these opportunities to go for either no cost or very low cost. So that's obviously our biggest challenge at the moment, and I would say that's as a county. And in our county, by the way, we have 178,000 kids. So we're talking about a massively huge county with a lot of kids that need to get out to those museums. But back in the day when we did have the partnerships, I think exactly what Amanda said, it's got to be about that communication, because as the teacher, we have certain objectives. We call it AKS objectives that we need to be teaching our kids.
Can you define AKS? Sorry.
AKS is the academic knowledge and skills, and it's basically, I'm going to loosely say, the curriculum that every discipline, K-12, follows in our county. So having to look at those objectives as visual art teachers, we know what it is that we need our kids to get out of it. And if we just assume that the museum educators are going to understand that, we're going to have big problems. So it's making sure ahead of time that we're communicating, hey, this is the objective that we need. This is, right now our kids maybe are talking about permanent collections. So we want to go in and we want to look at maybe 5 pieces
do you know why
of permanent
the video is working but the audio is not?
Oh, it sounds like Jennifer's.
Jen, I think we can hear you.
Jennifer, we can hear you.
Oh, hey, you can hear us. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. We were just calling our IT friends. Oh,
Thank you,
yay.
Debbie. Jennifer, it sounds like you got your tech working again.
Yes,
Hooray.
remarkably. Weren't you just talking about fiascos?
We were. How's that for a segue? Yeah, we were talking about problems we've run into in partnerships and what we learned from them. So maybe this is a chance for you and your colleague to introduce yourselves to the panel and to our viewers. And do you want to jump in with a fascinating problem you've experienced in partnerships?
Yeah, so I'm Jen Lehe. I'm the manager of strategic partnerships here, so I oversee our partnerships for learning.
I'm Kat Lynch. I'm a lead teaching artist and coordinator for Young Child Programming.
And so I asked Kat to join us because she's the teaching artist, and I was just telling her this earlier, just as a statement of fact and not intended as a compliment, that she's actually the driving force behind our most successful partnerships. So I thought it made sense for her to be here.
So maybe tell us a little bit about that partnership, just to give some context, and then maybe tell us a little bit about a problem you've run into along the way.
Yeah, so there's a few I had in mind, not to blindside you, but certainly imagine that, and I can talk about what I think is really successful about it, but why don't you?
Yeah, so Imagine That is a partnership that we have with local Head Starts. It's a preschool program, but it involves classroom visits, but then also some really extensive PD opportunities with the teachers. So it's not just us kind of going into the classroom doing kind of a one and done, but building a relationship over time through meeting as small groups, having conversations, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else really important to know without getting in the weeds too much.
So not to get too much into the weeds, but a couple of the things that I think are most successful about it is that every participant is really framed as a learner, and everybody walks away with a deeper understanding of what learning, thinking, and creativity, which is our big idea here at the Columbus Museum of Art, what creativity looks like at a given moment and how we can cultivate the conditions and foster the dispositions that support creativity. And so, when I think about the question of what success looks like, it really depends on what the outcomes are that you have for the programs. And all of our programs have separate outcomes, but one of the overarching outcomes is that we're developing the dispositions that support creativity. And when we say that, we mean for all the learners involved, the adult learners, the young learners, and Imagine That, as well as Project Pivot, which is a similar kind of a structure, but for a teen audience. What is really successful is that everybody involved is learning and seeing themselves as a learner and growing, and so it's fostering the relationships that you need for a good partnership, and it's with this openness, respect, and learning mindset.
Interesting. I'd like to engage with Jenny Marvel's question, which has 14 likes so far. She asks, partnerships require investment on both sides, teachers and museums. In my experience, it seems that the museums give more time to the partnership. How do you encourage investment throughout the year with teachers, including pre-post visit experience? Thoughts from the panel?
I need to read that, sorry.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
It is a great question.
It is, and I would say just a top of mind thought that I have is, talking with the educators about what they see as the value that you can add and what is the value that they can add, and really, strengthening the relationship that you have with them and having an ongoing dialogue. Teachers are incredibly busy, and we all want to be respectful of that, but thinking about how our relationships and conversations with educators can help us to identify what might encourage that particular educator to be more involved.
And if I can just add on to that, I would say when I think about approaching working with a teacher, I think of it much the same as I would approaching a learner of any age. So not only what do we have to offer, how can I kind of entice them, I guess, but also finding a real authentic need that I have for their specific skills and knowledge, because everyone likes to feel needed, and classroom teachers, as somebody who doesn't have a background in the classroom, have a whole wealth of knowledge and tips and tricks and procedures that I am so happy to mine and share from. So I think that the respect, I think that you mentioned, is really key, and coming at it from a reciprocal place is really important.
Great. Other thoughts from our panel?
You know, I think we've gotten really lucky where all of the teachers we've worked with have been really excited and really enthusiastic about the program. We do send pre-visit activities, whether or not that's us coming to visit them or before they come to visit us at the museum. We're usually in contact with them about 1 week prior to the visit, and we'll send them 3 or 4 things that we'd like them to cover. And usually it's reminding kids what a noun or a verb is, or reminding them what the museum is and where they're going, and museum behavior, because they have the authority over the classroom that sometimes new faces lack with children, where if they don't know you, it takes a little bit longer for them to listen to you or follow your instruction. And so it's nice having the teachers involved, because there's this own method to the madness that's really useful with elementary aged kids.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. This question reminds me a little bit about one of the schools we're partnering with, and how we're engaging with their professional learning communities. Megan, maybe I'll head that your way.
Yeah. This is a partnership that's a little bit different from some of our others, in that currently the other partnerships that we've started are really more student-facing. This one is so far almost exclusively teacher-facing, and so one of the teachers that was involved in a couple programs here at the Met was really interested in getting some of her colleagues on board in terms of integrating the arts into their classroom, and they have a professional learning community that meets a couple times, or more than a couple times, several, like monthly almost, throughout the year, throughout the school year, and they are working to identify some curriculum goals that they'd like to work on together, and then one of our museum educators will be guiding them through the process of really working on that goal within the museum setting, thinking about engaging their students through works of art. And so that's something where, I mean, so far, and this is something, Jen, you might get a chance to talk more about Project Pivot a little bit later, but something that really keeps coming up for me over and over again as a theme that's really important is this idea of self-directed learning being so important. And again, going back to the goals need to be coming from the school, need to be coming from the teacher. Not the teacher, the teachers needs to be coming from the sort of group that you'll be working with, like Project Pivot. The idea that what you're working on is authentically coming from what the learners want to do, want to know, want to explore. And I think in terms of keeping people invested and engaged throughout an entire year, that's a huge thing that can't be ignored. So it's something that we're really trying to stay attuned to as we get moving, especially in that PLC group.
I'm going to be very curious to see how that PLC moves forward. The other point that I think is interesting about these is that we're trying to work with existing structures within the school.
Right.
So we're not pushing in a program that the museum has and has success with. We went ahead and sat down with the principal and the teachers beforehand and basically found out about these professional learning communities within their school's ongoing professional development plan for their teachers. So in that sense, it seemed like a really nice alignment of systems that they already had in place.
And then it sort of naturally keeps going. It naturally keeps the ball moving.
Any other thoughts from the panel on strategies for encouraging investment throughout the year from the school and from the museum during a partnership?
I mean, I would say, not to put too fine a point on it, but just to build on Megan's, it's so much about the relationships and just building that solid foundation. It's slower, but it really does, pay off.
Interesting. Well, that seems like a nice segue to Erin Branham's question, which also has 14 pluses. So I'm going to suggest we shift gears over there. Erin asks us, how many of you do formative evaluation, doing needs assessments with teachers and administrators, students, before developing the content and format of a partnership with a school?
We do a ton of formative assessment, but not exactly in alignment with the second part of the question. So we use primarily documentation in the style of Reggio Emilia or the Project Zero visible learning initiatives, where we're every week, and that's really the backbone of Project Pivot, which Megan mentioned. But it's having that constantly looking at small moments of learning so that you can build on what students' interests are, maximize the opportunities that are presenting themselves, but also check in. And there are a few, I'm not here to promote Project Zero, but they've got some really fantastic tools for formative assessment that we use just as a test. And I used to think, now I think, and reflection is a big part of our own practice among educators, among our teaching team as well. So we do a ton of formative assessment in that way.
Are those assessment tools available online?
Oh yeah, I can.
Where would anybody interested go?
You know what? Let me
find the website.
I don't want to say the wrong URL, so I'm going to copy and paste it.
Sounds good. While Jen is getting that, anyone else on the panel want to jump into this formative evaluation? And
I'll agree with what Jenny said, is that the Project Zero assessment is wonderful. I've actually presented with Project Zero several times. It's kind of stepping away a little bit from the more, I guess, traditional based, Feldman theory of describe, analyze, interpret, and judge, and it's going into a little bit more open-ended questions, and then having the kids kind of come up with their own final judgment, and I think that that's kind of exciting. So. As far as developing it before or after, I don't know if that really has ever pertained to us. I mean, obviously in our teaching, we're always having kids, doing critiquing, doing assessment, as much as they're doing understanding art history and understanding the hands-on that's important in art. But I think it's just ongoing. So I don't think it would be something that I would think I would, do after. I mean, it's just an ongoing thing that I think art teachers are doing, hopefully.
I guess just to get an opinion in there, it's always scary to ask what your program's strengths are, because it also makes you identify what a program's weaknesses are. And so as we watch our programs progress, we do look and assess what's taking place and maybe what needs to change. And sometimes those are major changes and sometimes those are really small. But for the most part, it's very program specific, and it could be as easy as looking at word choice or really trying to identify what that common core standard is and if we're trying to reach it. So it's tough, but worth doing, both before and after.
And during.
and during. Constant evaluation.
Yeah, and I would say also just to underscore the importance of coming up with your own evaluation in alignment with what you want, what kind of thinking and what kind of process you want to promote. So we have internally our thinking like an artist rubric, which is where we've identified dispositions that we think support the creative process. And so we use that as a planning tool and as a check-in to guide our documentation. What are we looking for what are we looking to highlight, and what are we noticing? Where are we seeing evidence of this disposition at play? So really, just emphasizing that formative assessment should be linked with what you're looking to cultivate.
Great, thank you. And Jen, I see you've added the link to the chat forum, and it looks like Julene has gone ahead and put that on the Google Hangout event page. So anybody who's interested in finding those resources, head to NAEA's Google Plus page. Any other thoughts on the role of formative evaluation and assessment before partnerships begin? Okay. Emily Holtrop has 16 pluses, so let's jump into that question. We've sort of touched on this already, but what role does teacher professional development play in your museum school partnerships? Do you do teacher training, and if so, how does it relate to the larger partnership?
I'm excited. Well, I can jump on it because I'm excited, obviously.
You look excited. I think you should jump in.
So I'll just, to be totally honest, I love children and I love working with children. So working with adults has been a huge gift for me, but it also, I feel like to make sustainable change within schools or to create the kind of learning ecology that supports learners at all levels, it's a huge disservice to say, well, I'll work with you learners who are small and really cute, and grown-ups, you're on your own. So I think it's vital, not just from a sustainability standpoint, but from it goes back to relationship standpoint. If there's somebody willing to let me come into their classroom and work with these children that they're entrusted with, I feel like the least I can do is honor them as a learner and help support them, see if they can help support me, and start that relationship.
Yeah, and I oversee our teacher professional development here, and I would just say, to piggyback on that, that is where the sustainability piece is going to be. And because the young learners are with these teachers a whole lot more than they're with us. And I would also say that teacher professional development, one thing I've been really working on doing is reframing it as sort of participatory action research, where what am I also learning from these teachers around these central through line questions of, what does creativity look like, feel like, sound like throughout the process, and how do we support it? Teachers have a lot to contribute, and classroom teachers have a lot to contribute in that.
I'm going to attempt to sort of answer this, Emily. One thing that our local museum is doing, the Hutchins Center, that I think is really exciting, because what they're trying to do right now is grow more partnerships. And so they're trying to really open up the eyes of the classroom teachers and use the visual art teachers to do that. And in doing that, they're now hosting events at the museum that are free of charge for teachers to come to, and if you feed them, they will come. And so they offer food, and these teachers go out there, and then they end up doing hands-on art lessons sort of based on some of the art that's in the museum, and that generates really great excitement. I think a lot of teachers realize, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit ignorant to this, and that this is something that's 10 minutes down the road, and what an amazing experience that my kids can have with this. The other very eye-opening thing in what the Hutchins is doing right now is inviting a lot of art teachers to come in, because we tend to get so busy and so inundated in our own curriculum and objectives and the stuff that we have to do, that oftentimes I feel like we forget, and I'm going to put me in there with that conversation. But once our eyes are opened again, we're like, oh my gosh, it's our job to be helping these partnerships grow, and to be really encouraging the kids in the community and the classroom teachers to utilize these wonderful tools called museums.
In some ways, it sounds like what you're talking about relates to one of the earlier questions we had about sustaining engagement for the length of a partnership, and thinking about teacher training and teacher PD as a way to meet that goal.
It should be life sustaining.
Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying that so many of the teachers we work with are also artists. They are also parents. They have lots and lots of different identities, and finding ways to support them in those multiple identities can really help that component take shape. Any other thoughts on teacher training and teacher PD in museum-school partnerships?
I can just add from the Met perspective, yeah, we do include professional development, professional learning for the educators involved from our partner schools. But what that looks like, the form that takes for each partnership is very different. Maybe not very different, but it differs depending on what the needs the teachers are identifying and their comfort level coming to the museum. For one partner school, it's going to take the form of us just being in contact really in depth with one teacher. At another school, it's a small group of teachers who are coming in for basically one of our open registration workshops that we already have in place. That's more of a general overview of museum education and that kind of thing. So it just, yes, but it differs for each group.
Great. So one size doesn't necessarily fit all.
Right.
Great. Let's talk about money. Rachel Marino has asked, when talking about your program, can you tell us how it is funded? Is it free for schools? So I guess a larger question here is, what role does money play in establishing and sustaining the museum school partnerships that you're involved in?
I think money is one of the biggest obstacles for everybody involved. with Creativity Academy, the program that I've been using as an example throughout this, we are able, through funding or through our own budget, to provide the buses and to make it completely free for this school. But we do have other programs where schools need to commit a certain percentage of the financial responsibility, and it's tough. And programs that require schools to pay money or pay some sort of rental fee, it does limit your audience because those schools need to be able to afford it, which is why, I think we're really lucky here at MEA to have that healthy balance of offering free programming and identifying schools that can't afford it, and then also offering programs that cost some money. So we have revenue and we're able to do more with that. But money's tough. It's tough to find sponsors, and that's why I think in museums we love stats, because stats are this numerical proof that things are working and children are being reached, and it's tough. It's probably the biggest obstacle.
Yeah. Other thoughts on funding streams and the role of money in school partnerships?
Well, I've already mentioned it. You know my thoughts. There's not enough of it, time and money. But realistically, I think it's hurting the partnerships that we had in our county and probably in the state. In Georgia, if not the Southeast. It's something that we have to continue to have those conversations as the educators, as the schools, with our administrators, with our superintendents, however your counties run, to remind them, again, it's that huge communication piece, how vitally important these partnerships are, and just these opportunities for our kiddos to get out there into the museums and to get, that's real world learning, and it's really essential. So,
yeah, it sounds like in some way you're talking about advocacy.
Yeah. Yes, big time, yes. And educating. I mean, advocacy is educating. So it's just educating everybody in that this is money that's well spent. And so, yes, if you don't ask, you don't get. So you can find ways to hit the pavement and walk the talk and get sponsorships to sponsor you. But the schools have money. It's just us, I feel like it's teachers really advocating and really educating and explaining how that money, when used in these partnerships, is absolutely going to be a win-win. But the teachers have to do the research as well and form those partnerships head on.
Yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think, as educators, and we are profoundly busy, museum educators are profoundly busy, and we are very excited to move from one thing to another. No matter what kind of evaluation we might do, we don't necessarily take the time to craft the message and get it out there, but it is part of how we're going to be constantly in the business of advocating for the value, articulating the purposes and value of what we have to offer. I think that the work that when museum education is impactful, it is doing the things that we say we want our young people to have. And so the more that we can get out there and get that message out there, and Megan mentioned the Project Pivot report, which she knows about because we took the time, and it's incredibly time consuming and it takes money too, to do a thorough evaluation, to package that and to disseminate that. But that is part of the work that we all are doing all the time, or need to be doing all the time, so that we can make sure that we have those grants so that Head Starts can come free of cost and have that experience.
And if
I can tell you. Oh yeah, please.
Oh no, sorry. And if I could just kind of piggyback off that, and also call back to something that Chuck said earlier about empowering teachers to be advocates too. That has been one of the most helpful, as somebody on the other side trying to write the grant to get our third partner, whoever the funder may be, excited about the program. Letting teachers know, being very honest and saying this is grant supported. In the case of some of our programs, it's grant supported, but the best case that we can have is coming from you, not just us. And so empowering teachers, if you don't just tell me that you love the program, that's awesome and it feels good, but put it in writing, so email it or send it, or let me get an audio recording of you saying that. Then, I don't know, it's just another layer to strengthen that partnership and that relationship. And I think funders want to be part of that too. have a lot of voices coming in at them. So.
Yeah, and finding ways to articulate that in a way that funders can hear is so important. I know that with our med school partnerships that we're getting off the ground this year, some of them are grant supported. So the grants have, very strict rules. We have very strict boundaries that we're working within. Some of them have no funding source associated with them. So with those schools, what we've done is sat down with school leaders, mapped out their vision, their goals for which part of their communities we're going to go in depth with and how we can benefit the larger school community. And then we're working with them to draw up a budget that we can all agree on. So that is definitely a very iterative process when there is no grant money. Any other thoughts on this question before we move forward?
I was just going to mention, it's funny, Jen brought up this point that I made to her. We had a conversation separate to this over the summer. I was doing this sort of deep dive into what is a school partnership between a school and a museum, just because I'm still sort of a newcomer to it, and so just wanted to gather as much research I could about what's going on in the field, and made this mental note to myself that I was, for some reason, really attracted to the very glossy, highly produced, beautiful reports that had been produced. And it's interesting, like those are the ones that are usually backed by, grants and very well funded, very well supported in that way. Does it mean that those are the most easily replicated museum partnerships? No. Does it mean that, that the research being presented was totally helpful all of the time? No. But it's interesting. It's like that, packaging what you did in a way that makes sense both to your funders and to other museum professionals is really important. So it's just an interesting side note. Yeah.
Absolutely, not a side note at all, and in fact a useful segue to our next question. Michelle Grohe has asked, how do you define and demonstrate the benefits of your program, its impact, successes, etc., at the end of the academic year? And that's not just to students and classroom teachers and families, like for everybody involved in it, but how do you demonstrate its benefit to the larger world? So one way, of course, are these glossy brochures that Megan is talking about that are so often grant supported and so often sort of tie everything up into a nice, neat little bow. What are some other ways you've found successful in defining and demonstrating your program's impact and benefit?
Well, I think one of the most important things is whatever end of year, you mentioned how do you do it at the end of the year. I would argue, first of all, that you can't wait until the end of the year to do it. But often at the end of the year you have some kind of showcase where you invite families and communities to come and see what has been created. I would say, first of all, you have to have some process images and quotes in that so that they can see not only the products but the thinking and creativity that went into it, but also making the time, even though you want to take a deep sigh and let it out and celebrate the end of it, you have to spend that time talking with folks about what was this experience like, tell me about this, what do you notice when you look around, and remembering that advocacy is not the domain of the marketing department alone. Advocacy is not just the glossy things. It's the way that you talk about with your internal staff and with external stakeholders and community members and anybody at any time. What is the purpose and value that you add, and how do you see it? Mm-hmm. And it's not just in the products.
So finding a balance between process and product.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Amanda, sorry to cut you off there.
No, it's fine. With Creativity Academy, after each lesson, the children receive just a half sheet of paper with 2 questions on it, and it asks them to reflect on what it is they've done. And we ask them what they're most proud of, and we ask them what they would change or what they would improve on. And we collect those responses. They're, mailed back to us in prepaid envelopes, and it's a highlight to go through and see what these kids had to say about themselves and to watch them write. They put their confidence into words. I wouldn't change anything, I think it's great. But then there are kids that reflect on it and go, well, I wish I had spent more time, or I wish I had used more color. And it's wonderful to compile all of those and share it with people just so that they can see in children's handwriting and in their own words what they're taking away, what their benefit was. But we do, at the end of the program year, put on an exhibition of the kids' artwork. We get the past 2 years, we've gotten every child up in a frame or in a case Our registration team does a wonderful job at professionally hanging everything, and we have labels made, and we send buses to the schools, and the children come with their families for free, and we throw them an opening reception for their exhibition. But then it stays on view, free to the public, I think 12 weeks, so it's up for an extended period of time where we have wall panels that explain what the program is, and we give examples as to what it is they were doing in the classroom, so not just what they can see in the frames and in the wall, in the cases, but how the children got there, because like Jennifer said, it's really important to see that process, and of course, pictures of the kids doing it so that they can see the faces behind what they're looking at in the frames.
Yeah, the power of a well-organized culminating event. Interesting.
And speaking of if I may go real quick, of
That's what you're here
a
for.
culminating event. Obviously as art teachers, we are expected to exhibit student artwork. That's part of the process of art. But I do want to just talk really briefly about when these partnerships sort of began ending. The official partnerships in our county. I was very upset about it. I was teaching at the elementary level, and so I created an entire year-long curriculum called Museum Mania. And so what I did is I contacted 9 museums across the United States, and I talked to their education directors, and they gave me and sent me information. I explained to them that my kids could not go to museums anymore, so my job that year was going to be to take my kids virtually and hands-on to 9 museums across the United States. We were just going to go on a geographical journey and look at permanent collections, and then as each class, I was teaching 1,300 students at the time, so as those classes would finish with each of those museums, we would then hang all of the artwork that was created by the kids, and we left that art up, and it ended with a huge exhibit where we had probably 6,000 pieces of student artwork hanging, and we invited in the entire community, including the superintendent and the legislators and some of the big wigs. I always think the VIPs are the parents because they're the voters, but we brought in everybody to see this incredible experience and these amazing artworks that were created by the hands and the eyes of our future through looking at this work in museums. And then my, obviously big question at the end of that was, imagine what this work could be like if these kids had opportunities to visit these museums, or at least one that's 23 miles down the road. So I feel like that the impact of that was pretty strong, and it wasn't long after that they started allowing for a little bit more money to allow kids to start going to the museums. But I feel like it was that, really seeing the whole picture of this benefit of having kids participate in that museum education in the classroom. So getting there, not getting there, still having that conversation. I was talking with people in New Mexico, talking to people at the Getty, talking with people at the MoMA. So it was pretty amazing.
That's interesting, and it reminds me in some ways of what Megan was talking about earlier in terms of getting out there into the field and seeing what people are doing, asking questions, reaching out, and really making those big outreaches happen. I think we've got time. Oh, yeah, please.
Quick, you mentioned legislators. I just want to say, and I'm not going to get on a soapbox, but I don't think that it's pandering to put the value that you have in language that other people are going to respond to, as long as you are not selling short the deeper value of what you do. Creativity is the basis of innovation, and that is everybody's favorite buzzword these days. Advocate for what you believe in ways that are going to be heard by your audience.
Advocating for strong art education for every child, for every learner. I mean, that's the ultimate goal here. And in order to do that, you have to look at every tool that's out there. And in my opinion, as a 23-year veteran, seasoned art educator, our kids need to be able to see and be a part of and experience that museum education piece. I think that might be why I'm sitting on this panel, because I feel like it's that important. I really do. So when I bring in legislators, I mean, I'm bringing legislators in to show them what the kids can do, but I'm also inviting them in all the time to roll up their sleeves and get down and dirty and make some art. And it's amazing how many of them do. So, I feel like that's all part of that advocacy tool, is bringing in as many people and letting the kids talk about it. Those kids become the docents. They're the curators. They're the docents. They can talk about the art that they've
Thank you. I think we've got time for about one more question. Oh, are you still with us? Sorry. I didn't, I
Yeah,
just
I'm
got
good.
cut
Did
off
I
there,
get cut
Debbie.
off?
Sorry about that, Debbie.
Okay.
I was just
Nope,
transitioning. I
no
think we've
problem.
got time for about one more question, and I see that Andrea Canzano's question has 15 pluses. So I'm going to suggest we jump in on that for our last question. And she asks, when developing a program, how involved are you with the Common Core? She talks about pre-visit and post-visit activities, and generally then she asks, is there an expectation that the teachers are in charge of these activities? So maybe I'll just suggest we focus in on that Common Core component. What role does the Common Core play in the school museum partnerships that you've participated in? And how does that affect some of the other activities that are associated with the partnerships?
I can start. We look at Common Core and state standards, and we tell people that we support them, but we don't fulfill them. So we don't want there to ever be pressure that X, Y, and Z needs to take place for something to be successful. We don't want there to be this checklist that then put pressure on people and on children that may take away from the activity. So we do identify what those state standards are, and we look to serve them and support them and acknowledge them. But at the same time, we don't let it become such a stress that it takes away from the rest of the program and what the original intention of the program was. So it's tough. You want to be able to say that you support them and that you use them, because it's a huge selling point for schools that feel like they may not have time for a particular program or don't want to invest money in a particular program. So Common Core is a great way to promote yourself, but then you have to have the curriculum to back it up, and that can be tough. So we're just very careful with our language. We support, we don't fulfill. And if we do have programs that are able to fulfill Common Core, great. Sometimes we do, but we shy away from saying that we have successfully accomplished them.
So this is, yeah, I think this is a big issue in the field and a big question.
I think there was a reason there were 15 likes on that question.
Yeah. So we understand that teachers want tools that are aligned with content standards, and we also think that the thinking that is happening should be what drives the experience, and not we work really closely with an art teacher named Jason Blair in Dublin, Ohio, and he's fantastic. And he's working with us right now and he's very much the drum beater of, if you start with the thinking, you will meet the standards. And so one thing we're collaborating with him as part of an IMLS grant, Making Creativity Visible, that we're running. We're working with him to take some of the creativity challenges that he uses in his classroom and elaborate them with content standards, but in a way that is not spoon feeding. That starts at, so the goal is to create a compilation of creativity challenges that get students thinking in complex ways, and show where some of the content standards can plug in. But as the booklet goes on, it's more and more the job of the teachers, because really the teachers know the content standards better than we do, and they certainly know where they are in their own process, where their learners are with regard to those standards better than we could possibly, or any classroom teacher could possibly know about their about someone else's classroom. So creating it so that it's providing a little bit of that support, but it's really emphasizing the deeper thinking that that is happening, and inviting the teachers to apply their own thinking to the tool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and given that our time is short, I'll keep my thoughts on it succinct. One of the ways we found the Common Core really helpful was its interest in essential questions, and we've used that as a sort of driving structure with several of our partner schools, just as a simple, streamlined way to address that need, but also keep it real. Any other thoughts from the panel?
Just briefly, just to echo kind of everything everyone has said. In the Imagine That program, for example, working with teachers as kind of the boots on the ground. Often in our meetings, we'll ask them, what are you working towards, or what do you have to meet, and then kind of as a group try to back map. Okay, well, we did this open-ended creative thing, but this teacher over here can look at it and say, like, oh wow, there's actually a lot of gross motor, or because it's preschool, or There's actually some literacy woven in it, and they're writing out down their stories. So I think trusting the teachers and kind of making them active participants seems to be way more successful than starting out and saying, starting with the standards and going from there.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, believe it or not, our time together is almost up. So first of all, I want to thank our whole panel so much for carving out the time to participate in this and for dealing with the many tech adventures that we dealt with along the way. So thank you all so much for your time and your energy. I'm really grateful. For those of you who are listening in, please tune in to our next Google Hangout. It'll be on November 11th. And our theme will be the new Museum Education peer-reviewed online journal Viewfinder. So please tune in for that. And please know that if you missed some or any of this recording, or you want to share it with this conversation, or you want to share it with your peers, the entire thing has been recorded and can be accessed from NAEA's Google Plus Hangout page. So congratulations. Your conversation lasts in posterity.
Thank you, David.
All right, thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, so much for your time, and enjoy your autumn.
Thanks.